They seated me at table 12 with complete strangers because, according to my family, I didn't matter enough for the important tables. What they didn't know was that my date was running late from his interview on Good Morning America. My name is Victoria Chen, and that Saturday evening at my cousin Rebecca's wedding would become the moment I realized I had been invisible in my own family for far too long. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Fairmont Olympic Hotel in downtown Seattle was Rebecca's dream wedding venue, a grandiose setting that perfectly matched her grandiose personality and her family's grandiose expectations. The Pacific ballrooms sparkled with crystal chandeliers, ivory silk draping, and centerpieces that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Everything about the setting screamed expensive elegance, the kind of ostentatious display that my Aunt Margaret had been planning since Rebecca announced her engagement to Bradley Morrison, heir to a regional construction empire. I stood in the hotel lobby at 6:15, smoothing the fabric of my navy blue dress for the third time in 5 minutes, checking my phone for any message from Daniel. He had texted 2 hours earlier to confirm he would meet me at the wedding, but his schedule had been unpredictable lately due to the promotional tour for his latest film. Daniel Rivers was not just my boyfriend of 8 months, he was also a rising star in Hollywood, whose face had been appearing on magazine covers and talk show stages with increasing frequency over the past year. The irony of the situation was not lost on me. My family had always treated me like the unsuccessful cousin, the one who worked as a freelance graphic designer while living in a modest apartment in Capitol Hill, the one who showed up to family gatherings alone, while everyone else brought spouses and children to parade around like trophies of their domestic success. They had no idea that the quiet, unassuming Victoria they had been overlooking for years was dating someone whose name they would recognize from movie credits and entertainment news. I had not told them about Daniel because our relationship had developed during a period when I was deliberately reducing my involvement with family events. The constant comparisons to my more conventionally successful cousins had become exhausting, and I had been protecting my personal life from their judgment and interference. Daniel represented something precious and authentic in my life, something that belonged entirely to me without the complication of family opinions and expectations. The lobby was filling with wedding guests, most of whom I recognized from previous family gatherings over the years. There was my Uncle Thomas with his third wife, a woman 20 years his junior, who had been strategically introduced to the family as proof of his continued vitality and success. My cousin Marcus arrived with his wife Jennifer and their 2 children, the perfect nuclear family unit that had been earning them praise and attention at every family gathering for the past 5 years. Behind them came my Aunt Patricia, Rebecca's mother, resplendent in a beaded mother-of-the-bride dress that had undoubtedly required multiple fittings and consultations with wedding planners. Patricia had always been the family's social coordinator, the one who orchestrated seating arrangements and made decisions about who deserved inclusion in important family moments and who could be relegated to the periphery. I watched these family members greet each other with the performative warmth that characterized our gatherings, the kind of embraces and exclamations that looked affectionate from a distance but carried subtle undertones of competition and evaluation. Everyone was assessing everyone else's appearance, success markers, and relationship status, gathering information that would be processed into gossip and judgment over the coming weeks. My phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "Flight delayed, but I'll be there. Save me some cake. Can't wait to meet your family." The message was accompanied by a photo he had taken on the airplane, his familiar smile radiating the charm that had made him a favorite of casting directors and talk show hosts. Looking at his face on my phone screen, I felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety about introducing him to this particular group of people. The anxiety stemmed not from embarrassment about Daniel, but from uncertainty about how my family would react to discovering that the cousin they had been treating as an afterthought was involved with someone whose success far exceeded anything they had achieved. The revelation would force them to reconsider their assumptions about my life and status, but it might also create new complications and expectations that I was not prepared to navigate. My cousin Rebecca appeared in the lobby like a vision from a bridal magazine, her dress a masterpiece of lace and silk that had required 6 months of consultations with designers and seamstresses. She moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and posing for photographs, the center of attention in a way that she had always managed to achieve throughout our childhood and adolescence. Rebecca and I had grown up in the same neighborhood, attended the same schools, and participated in the same family gatherings, but our experiences had been dramatically different. She had always been the golden child, the one whose achievements were celebrated and whose choices were supported by family resources and encouragement. Her artistic talents had been nurtured through expensive classes and private instruction. Her academic success had been rewarded with college funding and graduate school support. Her romantic relationships had been embraced and celebrated by the extended family. My own achievements had been acknowledged, but not celebrated. Supported, but not enthusiastically promoted. Accepted, but not praised with the same level of enthusiasm that greeted Rebecca's accomplishments. The difference in treatment had been subtle but consistent, creating a dynamic where I learned to expect less attention and validation from family interactions. This pattern had continued into our adult lives. Rebecca's career as an interior designer had been launched with family connections and financial support, while my freelance graphic design work had been viewed as a temporary phase rather than a legitimate career choice. Her engagement to Bradley had been treated as a family triumph, while my single status had been a source of gentle but persistent concern and advice. The wedding guests began moving toward the ballroom for cocktail hour, and I joined the migration while continuing to check my phone for updates from Daniel. The cocktail hour was an elegant affair with servers circulating among guests offering champagne, artisanal appetizers, and the kind of sophisticated small talk that characterizes expensive social events. I found myself standing near the seating chart display, a large easel holding an ornate board that listed table assignments for all 150 wedding guests. The chart was organized like a social hierarchy, with immediate family and close friends assigned to tables near the head table, while more distant relatives and acquaintances were positioned progressively farther from the center of attention. Table 1 held Rebecca's parents and Bradley's parents, the patriarchs and matriarchs whose approval and presence legitimized the union. Table 2 seated Rebecca's siblings and their spouses, the next generation of family leadership who had earned their proximity through biological connection and social standing. Tables 3 through 6 contained the most successful cousins, family friends with impressive careers, and business associates whose presence added social and professional weight to the celebration. I scanned the chart looking for my name, expecting to find myself somewhere in the middle distance, neither honored with proximity nor exiled to the furthest reaches. Instead, I discovered my name at table 12, positioned near the back of the ballroom among people I had never met. The table included work colleagues of Bradley's parents, family friends from out of state, and plus ones of other guests who had been grouped together because they did not fit into any of the more cohesive social categories. The seating assignment was a clear message about my status within the family hierarchy. Table 12 was where they put people who needed to be invited but were not considered important enough to merit strategic placement. It was the social equivalent of being given a participation trophy, acknowledged but not valued, included but not celebrated. Standing there looking at my name relegated to the table of strangers, I felt a familiar mixture of disappointment and resignation that had characterized my relationship with family events for years. The seating arrangement confirmed what I had long suspected, that despite being family, I was not considered significant enough to warrant inclusion in the inner circles of celebration and recognition. The disappointment was not just about the table assignment itself, but about what it represented in terms of my family's perception of my life and achievements. The decision to place me with strangers indicated that they viewed me as someone without important relationships, significant accomplishments, or social value that would enhance the wedding celebration. I was filler, background decoration, someone to occupy a seat without contributing anything meaningful to the event. My phone buzzed again with another message from Daniel. Just landed. Getting in car now. Tell me you haven't eaten all the good food yet. The message was accompanied by a selfie taken in the airport, and looking at his face reminded me that my family's perception of my life was drastically incomplete. They had no idea that the person they had relegated to table 12 was in a relationship with someone whose success would dwarf anything represented at their carefully arranged head tables. The irony was delicious and infuriating in equal measure. While they were congratulating themselves on their sophisticated social orchestration, they were completely unaware that the guest they had deemed least important was about to introduce them to someone whose presence would overshadow everyone else in attendance. Their dismissal of my significance was about to be revealed as a spectacular miscalculation. But beyond the immediate satisfaction of knowing they were wrong, the seating chart revelation forced me to confront a larger question about my relationship with my family and my own sense of self-worth. Why had I been allowing their perception of my life to affect my self-esteem for so many years? Why had I been seeking validation from people who consistently demonstrated that they did not value my authentic self or genuine achievements? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The answer was complicated and rooted in patterns established during childhood, when family approval had felt necessary for psychological security and social belonging. The need for acceptance from relatives had persisted into adulthood even as I had built a life that was fulfilling and successful according to my own criteria. The disconnect between their perception and my reality had been creating ongoing tension that I had been managing through distance and limited contact. Looking at Table 12 on that seating chart, I realized that the time for managing and minimizing family dynamics had passed. The evening ahead would provide an opportunity to address the misperceptions and assumptions that had been shaping our interactions for years. Daniel's presence would certainly get their attention, but more importantly, it would create space for me to assert my authentic identity and worth independent of their validation or approval. The cocktail hour continued around me as I contemplated the significance of what was about to unfold. Other guests chatted and laughed and posed for photographs, unaware that the social dynamics they had assumed were fixed and predictable were about to be dramatically disrupted. The cousin they had overlooked, the family member they had underestimated, was about to introduce them to possibilities they had never imagined. My phone buzzed one final time with a message that made me smile. 5 minutes away. Hope you're ready to have some fun. Daniel had no idea what he was walking into, but his presence would transform not just the evening but potentially my entire relationship with the family dynamics that had been constraining my sense of possibility for far too long. Table 12 was about to become the most interesting seat in the house, and for the first time in family gathering history, everyone would be looking in my direction. The question was whether I was ready to handle the attention, the questions, and the inevitable recalibration of relationships that would follow this revelation. The moment of truth was approaching, and despite years of feeling invisible and undervalued, I discovered that I was absolutely ready to step into the spotlight and show my family exactly who Victoria Chen had become while they were not paying attention. The transformation of the evening began with a subtle shift in the atmosphere of the Pacific Ballroom, the kind of change that occurs when someone significant enters a room full of people who are suddenly questioning whether they have been paying attention to the right things. I was standing near the bar, nursing a glass of champagne and observing the social dynamics that had relegated me to Table 12, when I noticed heads beginning to turn toward the entrance, with expressions that ranged from curiosity to recognition to poorly concealed excitement. Daniel Rivers appeared in the doorway of the ballroom like a character stepping from a movie screen into reality, which was not entirely inaccurate given that his face had been appearing in theaters across the country for the past 18 months. He was wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit that had been selected by a stylist who understood how to make someone look effortlessly elegant while commanding attention. His presence carried the particular kind of confidence that comes from success that has been earned rather than inherited, the quiet assurance of someone who knows his worth without needing to prove it to others. What struck me most about watching Daniel enter the ballroom was not the immediate recognition from other guests, but the way his presence seemed to recalibrate the social energy of the entire space. Conversations became more animated as people positioned themselves hoping to be introduced. Postures straightened as individuals reassessed their own appearance and social positioning. The carefully orchestrated hierarchy that had seemed fixed and immutable suddenly felt fluid and uncertain. I watched this transformation with a mixture of anticipation and protective instinct. Daniel had no idea that he was walking into a family dynamic that had been shaping my self-perception for decades. He knew me as Victoria, the successful graphic designer who ran her own creative studio, Victoria, the woman who shared his interest in independent films and social justice causes. Victoria, who challenged his thinking and supported his career ambitions. He had never experienced me as Victoria, the overlooked cousin, the family afterthought, the person whose achievements were acknowledged but not celebrated. The version of myself that Daniel knew was confident, articulate, and secure in her own worth. That version had emerged during the months we had been together, as his genuine interest in my thoughts and perspectives had reminded me of capabilities and qualities I had suppressed in family contexts. His consistent respect for my professional expertise and personal insights had been healing in ways I was only beginning to understand. Our relationship had developed during a period when I was deliberately distancing myself from family expectations and obligations. Daniel had met me at an independent film festival where I was working on promotional materials for several documentary projects. His film was premiering that evening, and he had approached me after seeing some of my design work displayed in the festival program. Our first conversation had lasted 3 hours and covered everything from visual storytelling to environmental activism to the challenges of maintaining authenticity while working in industries that prioritized commercial success over artistic integrity. What had impressed me about Daniel from that first meeting was not his growing fame or obvious professional success, but his genuine curiosity about other people's work and perspectives. He had asked detailed questions about my design process, shared thoughtful insights about the relationship between visual art and social change, and demonstrated the kind of intellectual engagement that had been missing from most of my personal and professional relationships. His interest in my ideas had been authentic rather than performative, focused on understanding rather than impressing. Over the months that followed, our relationship had developed through shared interests and mutual respect, rather than the typical dynamics of celebrity dating that might have involved public appearances and social media performance. Daniel was at a stage in his career where privacy had become precious, and I had been protective of keeping our relationship separate from family scrutiny and potential interference. We had built something genuine and meaningful precisely because it existed outside the usual frameworks of social validation and external approval. Now, watching him navigate the ballroom toward me, I realized that our private sanctuary was about to become public knowledge in the most dramatic way possible. The family members who had been treating me as socially irrelevant were about to discover that I had been involved with someone whose presence would immediately elevate my status in their eyes. The irony was both satisfying and troubling. Satisfying because it would force them to reconsider their assumptions. Troubling because it suggested that my worth, in their estimation, was tied to my association with someone else's achievements, rather than recognition of my own inherent value. Daniel spotted me across the room and began moving in my direction, his path creating a small wake of whispered conversations and sideways glances. I could see family members beginning to register his presence and attempting to place where they recognized him from. The cognitive process was almost visible on their faces as they moved from general recognition to specific identification to mounting excitement about his proximity to their family celebration. My Aunt Patricia was the first to make the connection, her expression shifting from polite social monitoring to sharp-eyed assessment as she realized that the person walking toward her overlooked niece was someone whose photograph had been featured in Entertainment Weekly the previous month. I watched her mental calculation as she processed the implications of this development for her understanding of family social dynamics and her own social positioning within the wedding celebration. Uncle Thomas abandoned his conversation with Bradley's father mid-sentence, his attention captured by the possibility of celebrity proximity that could enhance his own social currency. My cousin Marcus stopped photographing his children and began angling for a better view of the developing situation. Even Rebecca, whose attention had been completely absorbed by her role as the center of attraction, began glancing toward Daniel with curiosity that suggested her wedding was about to include an unexpected element of excitement. The transformation in their behavior was immediate and profound. People who had been treating me as peripheral family were suddenly calculating how they might position themselves to be included in whatever was about to unfold. The social mathematics that had placed me at table 12 were being rapidly recalculated based on new information that completely altered my perceived value within their social ecosystem. Daniel reached me with a smile that carried genuine warmth rather than the performed charm he used in professional settings. He kissed my cheek and whispered, "Sorry I'm late." The interview ran long, and then Seattle traffic decided to test my patience. His greeting was natural and affectionate, the kind of casual intimacy that indicated established relationship rather than formal introduction. "You made it just in time," I replied, accepting the glass of champagne he had collected from a passing server. I was beginning to think I would have to explain to my family why my mysterious boyfriend was actually a figment of my imagination. His laugh was genuine and unguarded, the sound carrying across the immediate vicinity and causing several nearby conversations to pause as people strained to overhear our interaction. The chemistry between us was obvious and authentic, the kind of comfortable connection that cannot be manufactured for social purposes. Our ease with each other served as evidence that this was not a casual arrangement or recent development, but a substantial relationship with genuine foundation. "So this is the famous family I've been hearing about," Daniel said, scanning the ballroom with the kind of observational intelligence that had made him successful at creating believable characters. "I have to admit I'm curious to meet the people who raised someone as remarkable as you." His comment was overheard by my cousin Jennifer, who had been positioning herself within listening distance with the transparent hope of being included in our conversation. Her expression revealed surprise at hearing me described as remarkable by someone whose opinion clearly carried significant weight. The description forced her to reconsider assumptions she had been making about my life and relationships, based on incomplete information and family positioning. The word remarkable had particular power in this context because it represented external validation of my worth from someone whose success gave his opinion credibility within value systems that my family understood and respected. The same achievements and qualities they had been overlooking or minimizing were being recognized and celebrated by someone whose approval carried social currency they could not dismiss or ignore. I introduced Daniel to Jennifer and her husband with careful attention to their responses, watching their social calculation processes as they adjusted their behavior to accommodate the new information about my relationship status and social connections. The transformation was immediate and somewhat uncomfortable to observe, as people who had been treating me with casual dismissal suddenly became interested in my perspectives and experiences. "Victoria never mentioned she was dating anyone," Jennifer said with barely concealed curiosity and mild accusation, as if my privacy about personal relationships represented some form of social deception rather than reasonable boundary maintenance. "We've been keeping things fairly private," Daniel replied with diplomatic ease. "Victoria's work has been keeping her incredibly busy with some fascinating projects, and my schedule has been unpredictable with the film promotion circuit. We decided to focus on getting to know each other without the complications that can come from public attention." His response was perfectly calibrated to acknowledge their curiosity while establishing that our privacy had been intentional rather than secretive, a choice made for mature relationship management rather than social avoidance. The explanation also positioned my work as important and demanding, subtly correcting any assumptions they might have made about my professional success or social significance. The conversation continued for several minutes, during which I observed the fascinating process of watching family members recalibrate their perception of my social status in real time. The same person they had relegated to table 12 with strangers was now being treated as someone whose opinions and experiences merited attention and respect. The transformation was both vindicating and disturbing, satisfying because it confirmed that their previous treatment had been based on incomplete information, troubling because it revealed how conditional their respect and inclusion had always been. More family members began gravitating toward our location, their approaches ranging from subtle positioning to direct interruption of our conversation. My Aunt Patricia appeared with the social determination of someone who had identified an opportunity for enhanced social positioning and was not going to allow it to pass unexploited. "Victoria, darling," she said with warmth that had been entirely absent from our earlier interactions, "you must introduce me to your friend. I feel terrible that we haven't had a chance to meet before now." The word friend was clearly a fishing expedition designed to elicit information about the nature of our relationship, while her expression of regret about not meeting Daniel previously was disingenuous, given that she had never shown interest in my personal life or relationships. The sudden attention felt both gratifying and hollow, recognition that was clearly motivated by Daniel's presence rather than genuine interest in my well-being or happiness. Daniel handled the introduction with grace and professionalism, engaging with my aunt's questions while maintaining appropriate boundaries about our personal life. His responses demonstrated the media training he had received, providing information that satisfied curiosity without revealing private details that belonged only to us. Throughout the interaction, he consistently deferred to me and included me in the conversation as an equal partner rather than treating me as an accessory to his presence. The most significant moment came when my Aunt Patricia, having established Daniel's identity and relationship to me, suddenly began describing my achievements and qualities with enthusiasm that had been completely absent from decades of family interactions. She spoke about my graphic design work as if it were prestigious and important, mentioned my independence and creativity as if they were qualities she had always admired, and presented me to Daniel as if I were a family member whose success they had been celebrating and supporting throughout my career. The revisionist history was breathtaking in its transparency and shamelessness. The same achievements that had been dismissed or overlooked when they reflected only on me were suddenly being presented as evidence of family pride and support, now that they were associated with someone whose status enhanced the family's social currency. The performance was both infuriating and enlightening, revealing the conditional nature of their approval and the extent to which their treatment of me had been based on calculations about social advantage rather than genuine affection or respect. Daniel listened to this presentation with polite attention while occasionally glancing at me with expressions that suggested he was beginning to understand the family dynamics I had been protecting him from. His intelligence and emotional perceptiveness were making it impossible for him to miss the disconnect between their current enthusiasm and what must have been their previous treatment based on my stories and their current surprise at discovering our relationship. The evening was transforming in exactly the way I had anticipated, but experiencing the reality of that transformation was more complex than I had expected. The validation of having my worth recognized was satisfying, but the recognition was clearly contingent on external association rather than authentic appreciation of my inherent value. The attention was gratifying after years of being overlooked, but it came with complications and expectations that I was not certain I wanted to navigate. Standing there watching my family members compete for Daniel's attention, while suddenly treating me as someone worthy of inclusion and respect, I realized that this moment represented more than just social vindication. It was an opportunity to examine what kind of recognition I actually wanted from these relationships, and whether their conditional approval was something I needed or valued enough to maintain. The question was no longer whether I could earn their respect and inclusion, but whether their respect and inclusion were worth the emotional investment they would require. Daniel's presence had certainly gotten their attention, but the more important question was what I wanted to do with that attention now that I had it. The dinner bell chimed with crystal clarity through the Pacific ballroom, signaling the transition from cocktail hour to the seated reception, but the sound carried different meaning for me than it had 30 minutes earlier. I was no longer Victoria Chen, the overlooked cousin relegated to table 12 with strangers. I had become Victoria Chen, the woman dating Hollywood's rising star, the family member whose social currency had been dramatically revalued based on information that transformed their understanding of my worth and significance. Walking toward table 12 with Daniel beside me, I experienced the surreal sensation of watching my family members recalculate seating arrangements in real time. My Aunt Patricia approached with the purposeful stride of someone who had identified a social crisis requiring immediate diplomatic intervention. "Victoria, darling, I believe there has been a terrible mistake with the seating arrangements," she announced with the kind of dramatic concern typically reserved for genuine emergencies. "I cannot imagine how you and Daniel ended up at table 12. That table is entirely inappropriate for someone of his stature and your importance to the family." The transparent revision of my importance within 30 minutes of Daniel's arrival would have been comical if it had not been so revealing about the conditional nature of their respect and inclusion. The same seating arrangement that had been perfectly acceptable when they believed I was attending alone had suddenly become a social catastrophe now that my date elevated their perception of my status. Daniel responded with diplomatic grace that demonstrated his media training while subtly challenging their assumption that his comfort depended on social positioning rather than genuine company. "Actually, I'm looking forward to meeting new people," he said with authentic enthusiasm. "Victoria tells me she enjoys getting to know different perspectives, and I suspect we'll have more interesting conversations with people we haven't met than we would at a table full of family members comparing career achievements and real estate investments." His response was perfectly calibrated to acknowledge their concern while rejecting the premise that his worth or comfort was determined by social hierarchy. More significantly, his reference to my preference for diverse perspectives positioned me as someone with sophisticated social intelligence rather than someone who had been relegated to less desirable seating due to perceived irrelevance. I watched my aunt process this response with visible confusion, struggling to understand why someone of Daniel's social and professional standing would voluntarily choose authentic connection over status-based positioning. Her worldview had been constructed around assumptions about power, influence, and social climbing that made Daniel's genuine interest in meeting strangers incomprehensible rather than admirable. But surely you would prefer to sit with Rebecca's parents and the other distinguished guests. Patricia persisted with the determination of someone who could not accept that her social calculations had been fundamentally flawed. I'm certain we can make arrangements to accommodate someone of your prominence at a more appropriate table. The word prominence hung in the air like a revelation of values that had been operating beneath the surface of family interactions for years. Patricia was not concerned about Daniel's comfort or our relationship experience. She was concerned about the social optics of having a celebrity seated in what she perceived as the social equivalent of exile, and the missed opportunity for enhanced family status that his presence represented. Daniel glanced at me with an expression that conveyed both amusement at the social maneuvering and recognition of the family dynamics I had been navigating throughout my adult life. His intelligence and emotional perceptiveness were making it impossible for him to miss the implications of their sudden interest in my welfare and social positioning. I appreciate your concern, he replied with professional courtesy that carried subtle boundaries, but Victoria and I are perfectly content with our seating arrangement. We're here to celebrate Rebecca and Bradley's wedding, not to position ourselves within social hierarchies that frankly don't interest us very much. His response was a masterclass in polite rejection that simultaneously dismissed their status-based thinking while redirecting attention to the actual purpose of the gathering. The phrase "don't interest us very much" was particularly powerful because it suggested that their value system was not just irrelevant to him, but actively uninteresting to someone whose success gave his opinions weight within their social framework. As we continued toward table 12, I became acutely aware of the conversations pausing and heads turning as other guests processed the visual information of Daniel Rivers walking through the ballroom toward the table designated for social afterthoughts. The cognitive dissonance was visible on their faces as they attempted to reconcile their assumptions about celebrity behavior with the reality of someone choosing authenticity over status. Table 12 turned out to be far more interesting than the family tables would have been. Our table mates included Dr. Sarah Martinez, a pediatric surgeon who had been invited as Bradley's colleagues +1, James Wong, a documentary filmmaker who had been seated there because he did not fit into any of the predetermined social categories, and Maria Santos, an environmental activist who had been included because she was dating one of Rebecca's college friends. The irony was immediately apparent. The table that had been designated for social misfits and overlooked guests actually contained some of the most accomplished and intellectually engaging people at the wedding. Dr. Martinez was developing innovative surgical techniques for pediatric heart conditions. James had recently completed a documentary about climate change impact on indigenous communities that had been accepted to several major film festivals. Maria was leading policy initiatives that were changing environmental regulations at the state level. These were people whose work was making genuine contributions to society, whose achievements extended far beyond personal advancement or social positioning. They had been relegated to table 12, not because their accomplishments lacked significance, but because their significance could not be measured using the narrow criteria that my family applied to determine social worth and inclusion priority. Daniel immediately engaged with our table mates with the authentic curiosity that had attracted me to him during our first meeting at the film festival. His questions about Dr. Martinez's surgical innovations demonstrated genuine interest in medical advancement, rather than polite social conversation. His discussion with James about documentary filmmaking revealed sophisticated understanding of storytelling techniques and social impact messaging that went far beyond celebrity small talk. Watching Daniel interact with our table companions, I experienced a profound shift in perspective about the evening's events. The seating arrangement that had initially felt like social punishment had actually provided us with access to the most interesting and accomplished people at the wedding. The family members who had been positioned at prestigious tables based on biological connection and social status were missing the opportunity to engage with individuals whose work was creating meaningful change in the world. This realization triggered a deeper recognition about the value systems that had been shaping my self-perception and family relationships for years. I had been allowing people whose primary achievements were inherited wealth, conventional career success, and social positioning to determine my worth and significance. I had been seeking validation from individuals whose own accomplishments were often less substantial and socially beneficial than my own professional work and personal relationships. The conversation at Table 12 flowed with intellectual energy and authentic engagement that was entirely different from the performative social interactions I had observed during cocktail hour. Dr. Martinez shared insights about healthcare accessibility that challenged assumptions about medical practice. James discussed the intersection of environmental justice and storytelling in ways that illuminated connections between art and social change. Maria described policy work that was creating tangible improvements in environmental protection. Daniel contributed perspectives about media influence and social responsibility that demonstrated the thoughtful approach he brought to his career choices and public platform. His comments revealed someone who understood his professional success as opportunity for positive impact rather than personal aggrandizement, someone whose values aligned with substance over superficiality. I found myself contributing to the conversation with confidence and authenticity that had been suppressed during family interactions for years. My insights about visual communication and social messaging were valued and built upon by people who understood the significance of design in shaping public awareness and behavior change. My perspectives were welcomed as valuable contributions rather than polite acknowledgments of family inclusion. The contrast between this experience and typical family gathering conversations was stark and illuminating. Instead of discussing real estate investments, vacation destinations, and career advancement strategies, we were exploring ideas about social impact, creative expression, and meaningful contribution to society. Instead of competing for attention and status validation, we were collaborating to understand complex issues and share diverse perspectives. As the evening progressed through dinner courses and wedding speeches, I became increasingly aware that the social positioning I had been concerned about was not just irrelevant, but counterproductive to the kind of connections and experiences that actually contributed to personal fulfillment and growth. The prestigious tables were filled with conversations about material achievements and social comparisons, while Table 12 was generating discussions that were intellectually stimulating and personally meaningful. This recognition extended beyond the wedding context to illuminate patterns in my broader life choices and relationship priorities. I had been allowing family approval and social positioning to influence decisions about career development, social activities, and personal relationships in ways that had limited my access to authentic connection and meaningful engagement. The desire to earn respect from people whose values I did not share had been constraining my ability to fully embrace opportunities and relationships that aligned with my genuine interests and priorities. The most significant realization came during Rebecca's wedding speech, when she thanked various family members for their support and contributions to her success and happiness. Her acknowledgments followed predictable patterns of recognizing people based on their social status and biological proximity rather than the actual impact of their support and encouragement. She thanked wealthy relatives for financial contributions, prestigious family members for social connections, and immediate family for genetic loyalty. What she did not mention were the people who had provided emotional support during difficult periods, intellectual stimulation during periods of growth, or authentic encouragement during times of self-doubt. The contributions that were celebrated were transactional and status-based, rather than relational and meaningful. The success that was being honored was measured by external validation rather than internal fulfillment or positive impact on others. Listening to this speech while sitting at a table full of people whose work was creating genuine positive change in the world, I experienced a clarity about my own values and priorities that had been obscured by years of seeking approval from family members whose definition of success was fundamentally misaligned with what actually mattered to me. I realized that my disappointment about being seated at Table 12 had been based on accepting their framework for measuring worth and significance, rather than applying my own criteria for what constituted meaningful recognition and inclusion. I had been seeking validation from people whose approval was conditional, on conforming to values that did not reflect my authentic priorities or contribute to my genuine happiness and fulfillment. The evening was revealing that the social positioning I had been concerned about was not just unimportant, but actively harmful to my ability to recognize and appreciate the relationships and opportunities that were actually valuable and meaningful. The perspective that had relegated me to table 12 was the same perspective that prevented recognition of the substantial accomplishments and fascinating personalities of our table companions. Daniel reached over and took my hand during a particularly tedious speech about family legacy and traditional values, his touch conveying understanding and support that transcended the social dynamics surrounding us. His presence had certainly changed how my family perceived me, but more importantly, the evening was changing how I perceived myself and the relationships that deserved my investment and attention. The question was no longer whether I could earn their respect and inclusion, but whether their respect and inclusion were consistent with my authentic values and conducive to my genuine happiness. The answer was becoming increasingly clear, and it was profoundly liberating rather than disappointing. The transformation from passive acceptance to active assertion began during the dessert course, when my Uncle Thomas approached our table with the presumptuous confidence of someone who had spent decades believing that his opinions and presence were universally welcome. He had been observing our animated conversation from across the ballroom, his expression revealing the calculating assessment that had become his signature approach to social interactions that might benefit his personal or professional interests. "Daniel, I hope you don't mind the interruption," Thomas began with the practiced charm that had served him through 3 marriages and multiple business partnerships. "But I wanted to introduce myself properly. Thomas Chen, Victoria's uncle and senior partner at Chen Development Group. I've been following your career with great interest, particularly your recent project with Environmental Impact Studios." The introduction was masterful in its transparent self-promotion, managing to establish his business credentials, claim familial authority over me, and demonstrate knowledge of Daniel's work that would position him as someone worth knowing rather than simply another wedding guest seeking celebrity attention. Thomas had clearly conducted research during the cocktail hour, gathering information that would enable more sophisticated networking than casual fan interaction. Daniel responded with professional courtesy while maintaining the boundaries that had characterized his interactions throughout the evening. "Thomas, pleasure to meet you. Victoria has mentioned her family's various business interests. Environmental Impact Studios has been doing fascinating work at the intersection of entertainment and social awareness." The response was diplomatically neutral, acknowledging Thomas without encouraging extended conversation or expressing particular interest in business connection. Daniel had developed sophisticated skills in managing unsolicited networking attempts while maintaining social grace, but I could sense his growing awareness of the family dynamics that had been shaping my experience for years. Thomas continued with the persistence that had made him successful in real estate development and equally exhausting in family relationships. "I'd love to discuss some potential collaboration opportunities when you have time. We're developing several properties that could benefit from the kind of socially conscious messaging that your projects represent. Environmental sustainability is becoming increasingly important to our target demographics." The language was carefully chosen to suggest mutual benefit rather than one-sided opportunity seeking, but the underlying calculation was transparent to anyone familiar with Thomas's approach to relationship building. He had identified Daniel as someone whose association could enhance his business reputation and social positioning, and was attempting to establish connection that could be leveraged for future advantage. I watched this interaction with growing clarity about patterns that had been operating throughout my adult relationship with family members, who viewed personal connections primarily as networking opportunities, rather than sources of genuine relationship and mutual support. The same calculating assessment that Thomas was applying to Daniel had been applied to me for years, with the consistent conclusion that my associations and achievements did not offer sufficient return on investment to warrant significant attention or inclusion. The recognition that my worth within family dynamics had been consistently evaluated according to transactional criteria rather than intrinsic value created a moment of profound clarity about the conditional nature of their interest and approval. Thomas's sudden attention to me was not based on newfound appreciation for my qualities or accomplishments, but on recalculation of my social currency based on my association with someone whose success elevated my perceived utility within his networking framework. This realization catalyzed something within me that had been building throughout the evening, a combination of accumulated frustration with superficial family dynamics and growing confidence in my authentic worth that existed independent of their validation or approval. The contrast between the meaningful conversations I had been having with our table companions and the shallow maneuvering that characterized interactions with family members had crystallized my understanding of what kinds of relationships actually contributed to personal fulfillment and growth. Thomas, I interjected with calm authority that surprised both him and myself. I appreciate your interest in Daniel's work, but we're currently enjoying our conversation with the accomplished professionals at our table. Perhaps we can continue family discussions at a more appropriate time. The intervention was polite but unmistakably firm, establishing boundaries around our evening experience while redirecting Thomas's attention away from networking opportunities toward respect for our autonomous social choices. The response carried subtle but clear communication that his presumption of access and authority was not acceptable, and that my relationship with Daniel was not available for his business development purposes. Thomas's expression revealed surprise at encountering resistance from someone he had been accustomed to treating as socially subordinate and generally compliant with family hierarchies and expectations. His calculation had not accounted for the possibility that I might assert independent judgment about social interactions or protective boundaries around my personal relationships. Of course, he replied with practiced grace that masked obvious recalibration of his approach. I didn't mean to impose. We'll certainly find time to catch up properly when the celebration allows for more extended conversation. The response maintained social courtesy while establishing his intention to pursue future connection, but his tone carried acknowledgement that his initial approach had been inappropriate and would require adjustment. The interaction had served as clear communication that my relationship with Daniel was not an asset available for family exploitation, and that my social positioning was not subject to their management or direction. As Thomas returned to his table, I experienced a profound sense of empowerment that extended far beyond the immediate social interaction. The ability to establish boundaries and assert autonomous judgment in family contexts had been underdeveloped throughout my adult life, suppressed by patterns of seeking approval and avoiding conflict that had prioritized harmony over authenticity and inclusion over integrity. Daniel's presence had certainly provided external validation that enhanced my confidence in asserting boundaries, but the capacity for such assertion had been present within me throughout the years of accepting diminished treatment and marginal inclusion. His respect for my judgment and consistent support for my perspectives had reminded me of capabilities that had been suppressed rather than absent, dormant rather than non-existent. That was beautifully handled, Dr. Martinez commented with appreciation that carried professional recognition of effective interpersonal management. Setting boundaries with family members who view relationships as networking opportunities requires both clarity and courage. Your uncle received clear communication without public embarrassment, which demonstrates sophisticated social intelligence. Her observation highlighted an important aspect of the interaction that had not been immediately apparent to me. The boundary setting had been accomplished with grace and effectiveness that protected both my autonomy and Thomas's dignity, demonstrating skills in relationship management that contradicted family narratives about my social capabilities and interpersonal competence. James Wong added his perspective with the observational acuity that had made him successful in documentary filmmaking. Family dynamics often reveal the most about individual character development and authentic self-knowledge. Your response suggested someone who has developed clear understanding of personal values and is willing to protect those values even when doing so challenges established relationship patterns. The comment illuminated the broader significance of what had transpired during the brief interaction with Thomas. The boundary setting had not been simply about managing an individual's social encounter, but about asserting fundamental principles about relationship authenticity and personal dignity that would influence all future family interactions and social positioning decisions. Maria Santos contributed insights from her experience in environmental activism that connected personal boundary setting with broader social change principles. Systemic change often begins with individuals who develop sufficient self-awareness and personal strength to stop participating in dynamics that compromise their values and authentic expression. Personal transformation becomes social transformation when people consistently choose integrity over acceptance. Her perspective framed my interaction with Thomas as representative of broader patterns, in which individuals learn to resist systems that diminish their authentic worth in favor of external validation and conditional approval. The connection between personal empowerment and social change provided a framework for understanding the evening's revelations that extended beyond family dynamics to encompass fundamental questions about living authentically within systems that prioritize conformity and status over individual expression and meaningful contribution. The conversation that followed this analysis was profoundly different from any discussion I had ever experienced at a family gathering. Instead of focusing on gossip, status comparisons, or material achievements, we explored concepts of personal integrity, authentic relationship building, and the courage required to live according to internal values rather than external expectations. Daniel contributed insights about maintaining authenticity while working within entertainment industry systems that often prioritized commercial considerations over artistic integrity and personal values. His perspectives revealed someone who had developed sophisticated strategies for protecting creative vision and personal principles while achieving professional success within structures that could easily compromise both. The discussion illuminated common themes across different professional and personal contexts, revealing universal challenges in maintaining authentic self-expression while navigating systems that rewarded conformity, compromise, and strategic self-presentation over genuine contribution and individual integrity. As the evening progressed toward the traditional wedding activities of cake cutting and dancing, I found myself observing the celebration from an entirely different perspective than I had maintained during previous family gatherings. Instead of focusing on my position within their social hierarchy, or seeking validation of my worth according to their criteria, I was evaluating their dynamics according to my own values and authentic priorities. The shift in perspective was profound and liberating. Rather than feeling excluded from their conversations about real estate investments and vacation destinations, I recognized that such conversations held no interest for me and offered no opportunity for meaningful connection or intellectual growth. Rather than feeling diminished by their focus on material achievements and social positioning, I understood that their value system was fundamentally misaligned with what actually contributed to personal fulfillment and authentic relationship building. The recognition that I had been seeking approval from people whose approval was not worth having created space for appreciation of relationships and interactions that were actually valuable and meaningful. The conversations with our table companions had demonstrated the kind of intellectual engagement and authentic connection that I found genuinely satisfying, while family interactions had revealed the superficiality and conditional nature of relationships based primarily on biological connection and social convenience. This clarity extended beyond the wedding context to illuminate broader patterns in my life choices and relationship priorities. I had been allowing family expectations and social positioning concerns to influence decisions about career development, social activities, and personal relationships in ways that had limited my access to authentic connection and meaningful engagement. The evening had provided opportunity to experience an alternative approach to social interaction based on genuine interest, mutual respect, and shared values rather than status positioning and transactional relationship building. The contrast had revealed possibilities for living more authentically and building relationships that supported rather than constrained personal growth and self-expression. The question that emerged from this recognition was not whether I could earn their respect and inclusion according to their criteria, but whether investing energy in maintaining relationships that required suppression of my authentic self was consistent with building a life that reflected my genuine values and priorities. The answer was becoming increasingly clear, and it carried implications that extended far beyond a single wedding celebration into fundamental questions about how to structure social relationships and life choices around authentic self-expression, rather than external validation and conditional approval. The dance floor opened with the traditional first dance between Rebecca and Bradley, their choreographed movements reflecting the same careful orchestration that had characterized every aspect of their wedding celebration. As I watched them glide across the polished marble floor, surrounded by the approving gazes of family members and wedding guests, I experienced a profound shift in perspective about what constituted genuine celebration versus performative display. The couple moved with practiced precision through steps they had rehearsed for months with a professional instructor, their performance designed to create the impression of effortless romance, while actually representing significant investment in maintaining appearances that aligned with social expectations. The dance was beautiful but sterile, technically proficient but emotionally distant, a perfect metaphor for the relationship dynamics that had characterized family interactions throughout my adult life. Daniel leaned over and whispered, "They dance well together, but I prefer the kind of dancing that happens when people stop thinking about what they look like and start feeling the music." Quote, his observation captured something essential about the difference between authentic expression and performed competence that had been illuminating my understanding throughout the evening. As other couples began joining the dance floor for the traditional family dance portion of the celebration, I observed the careful social choreography that determined who would be invited to participate and who would remain seated as observers. The selection process followed predictable patterns based on family hierarchy and social significance, with immediate family members and distinguished guests receiving priority consideration for inclusion in moments that would be captured by photographers and remembered as representative of the celebration. My parents approached our table with expressions that revealed their internal conflict between decades of treating me as socially peripheral and their recent recognition that my association with Daniel elevated my status within their social calculation frameworks. My mother wore the carefully composed smile that had become her signature approach to managing social situations that required balancing competing interests and expectations. "Victoria, dear," she began with the formal courtesy that had replaced genuine warmth in our interactions years earlier. "The photographer would like to take some family photos during the dancing, and we thought it would be wonderful if you and Daniel could join us for a few pictures." The invitation represented a dramatic reversal from their typical approach to family photography, which had historically positioned me in background locations while featuring more socially significant family members in prominent positions. The sudden interest in including me in official family documentation was clearly motivated by Daniel's presence, rather than newfound appreciation for my intrinsic value within family relationships. I experienced the familiar internal tension between gratitude for inclusion and resentment about the conditional nature of their recognition. The invitation was simultaneously what I had wanted for years, and a transparent demonstration of the superficial criteria they applied to determine my worth and significance within family contexts. Daniel responded before I could formulate my own reply, his tone carrying polite appreciation combined with gentle boundary establishment. "I appreciate the invitation, but Victoria and I were actually planning to spend more time talking with the fascinating people at our table. Dr. Martinez has been sharing insights about pediatric surgery that are absolutely compelling, and James has been telling us about his documentary work that sounds like it could change how people think about environmental justice." His response was diplomatically elegant, acknowledging their invitation while redirecting attention to the meaningful conversations and authentic connections that were actually contributing to our evening experience. The implicit message was that official family photography held less appeal than genuine intellectual engagement with accomplished individuals whose work extended beyond social positioning and material success. My mother's expression revealed confusion about why someone would prioritize conversation with strangers over participation in family recognition activities that carried social value and photographic permanence. Her worldview had been constructed around assumptions about prestige and inclusion that made Daniel's preference for authentic engagement incomprehensible, rather than admirable. I found myself supporting Daniel's response with confidence that surprised both my parents and myself. "We're having wonderful conversations with our table companions about their work in healthcare, environmental activism, and documentary filmmaking. These are exactly the kinds of people and discussions that make social events meaningful for us." The response was carefully crafted to explain our choice while subtly challenging their assumption that family photography represented the most valuable aspect of the wedding celebration. The emphasis on meaningful conversations and accomplished individuals served as gentle criticism of social dynamics that prioritized appearance and status over substance and authentic connection. My father, who had been observing this interaction with the analytical assessment that characterized his approach to business negotiations and family management, attempted a different strategy for securing our participation in activities that would enhance family social positioning. "Daniel, I understand your interest in serious conversation, but surely you recognize the importance of family documentation for Victoria's future relationships with extended family members. These photographs become treasured memories that connect generations and preserve important family moments. His appeal was more sophisticated than my mother's direct invitation, framing participation as beneficial for my long-term family relationships rather than simply requesting compliance with their social agenda. The language was calculated to suggest that declining would demonstrate insufficient consideration for my ongoing family connections and future regret about missed opportunities for inclusion. Daniel's response revealed the media training and diplomatic skills that had served him in navigating entertainment industry relationships while maintaining personal integrity and authentic values. Family relationships that depend on photographic documentation rather than genuine understanding and mutual respect might not be the kind of connections that contribute to long-term happiness and fulfillment. The statement was profound in its simplicity and devastating in its accuracy. He had identified the fundamental flaw in their approach to family relationship building, which prioritized symbolic gestures and visual evidence over authentic emotional connection and mutual support. The observation forced examination of whether their interest in including us was motivated by genuine affection or strategic social positioning. The silence that followed his response was heavy with implications that extended far beyond the immediate question of photography participation. Daniel had articulated something that I had been feeling but had never been able to express clearly: that relationships based on conditional approval and social calculation were fundamentally different from relationships based on genuine understanding and mutual respect. My parents exchanged glances that conveyed their recognition that this conversation was not proceeding according to their expectations, and that their standard approaches to family influence and social management were not effective with someone whose success provided independence from their approval and validation systems. After they departed to pursue other family photography opportunities, I experienced a profound sense of liberation that extended beyond the immediate social interaction. The ability to decline participation in family activities that felt inauthentic or superficial had been demonstrated as not only possible but entirely appropriate when such activities conflicted with genuine preferences and authentic relationship priorities. The evening continued with increasing clarity about the distinction between relationships that supported authentic self-expression and relationships that required performance of socially acceptable versions of identity. The conversations at our table maintained their intellectual depth and genuine engagement, while interactions with family members revealed consistent patterns of conditional interest and transactional relationship approaches. Dr. Martinez shared stories about her work with pediatric patients that illustrated the profound satisfaction that came from professional activities that directly contributed to human welfare and medical advancement. Her descriptions of surgical innovations and patient outcomes demonstrated the kind of meaningful achievement that extended far beyond personal recognition or financial success to encompass genuine service to others and contribution to medical knowledge. James Wong discussed his documentary filmmaking process with passion that revealed someone whose professional work was deeply connected to personal values and social commitment. His current project about environmental justice was requiring years of research and relationship building with communities that had been historically overlooked by mainstream media attention, demonstrating dedication to authentic storytelling rather than commercially driven content creation. Maria Santos described her environmental activism work with the kind of detailed knowledge and strategic thinking that revealed someone whose professional activities were motivated by genuine commitment to systemic change rather than personal advancement or social recognition. Her policy initiatives were creating tangible improvements in environmental protection that would benefit future generations, regardless of whether her contributions received public acknowledgement or personal credit. These conversations provided stark contrast to the family interactions I'd observed throughout the evening, which had focused primarily on status symbols, social positioning, and material achievements that served individual advancement rather than broader social benefit. The difference in both content and quality was dramatic and illuminating, revealing possibilities for social engagement that were both intellectually stimulating and personally meaningful. As the evening progressed toward its conclusion, I began contemplating how the insights and recognition that had emerged during the wedding celebration would influence my broader life choices and relationship priorities moving forward. The clarity about authentic values versus inherited expectations had implications that extended far beyond family dynamics to encompass professional decisions, social activities, and personal relationship criteria. The recognition that I had been seeking validation from people whose approval was conditional on conforming to values that contradicted my authentic priorities suggested that significant changes would be necessary in how I structured my life and allocated my time and energy. The relationships and activities that had been consuming significant emotional investment were not contributing to genuine fulfillment or personal growth. Daniel's presence had certainly catalyzed these realizations by providing external validation that enhanced my confidence in questioning established family dynamics. But the capacity for such questioning had been present within me throughout the years of accepting diminished treatment and marginal inclusion. His consistent respect for my judgment and perspectives had reminded me of capabilities and values that had been suppressed rather than absent. The evening had demonstrated that authentic self-expression was not only possible, but essential for building relationships and experiences that contributed to genuine satisfaction and personal development. The choice between seeking approval from family members whose values were misaligned with my authentic priorities and investing energy in relationships that supported genuine self-expression was becoming increasingly clear. The implications of this choice extended beyond immediate social decisions to encompass fundamental questions about how to structure life around authentic values rather than inherited expectations, meaningful relationships rather than biological obligations, and genuine contribution rather than social positioning. The wedding celebration had become a laboratory for examining these questions and beginning to implement changes that would support more authentic living. The dance floor continued its choreographed celebration around us, as our table maintained its engaged conversation about substantive topics that connected personal experience with broader social issues and meaningful professional contribution. The contrast between these two modes of social interaction had never been more apparent or more significant for understanding what kinds of relationships and activities actually contributed to personal fulfillment and authentic self-expression. The question was no longer whether I could earn family approval and inclusion according to their criteria, but whether investing energy in relationships that required suppression of authentic self-expression was consistent with building a life that reflected genuine values and contributed to meaningful personal and social development. The wedding reception began to wind down as the evening approached its natural conclusion, but the conversations at table 12 had evolved into something far more significant than typical wedding guest interaction. What had started as polite introductions among strangers relegated to social periphery had transformed into a collaborative exploration of how accomplished individuals navigate the tension between authentic self-expression and social expectations in their respective professional and personal contexts. Dr. Martinez had begun sharing specific examples of how she maintained medical ethics and patient advocacy within healthcare systems that often prioritized financial efficiency over optimal patient outcomes. Her stories revealed sophisticated strategies for protecting professional integrity while working within institutional constraints that did not always align with individual values or patient welfare priorities. The challenge in medicine is maintaining focus on genuine healing and patient advocacy when administrative systems reward productivity metrics and cost reduction over treatment quality and patient satisfaction. She explained with the precise articulation that characterized her professional communication. I have learned to document my decisions thoroughly and build coalitions with colleagues who share similar values, which creates protection for patient-centered approaches that might otherwise be discouraged or penalized. Her approach demonstrated practical applications of maintaining authentic professional practice within systems that could easily compromise individual values and patient welfare. The strategies she described required both courage and strategic thinking, combining principled decision-making with sophisticated understanding of institutional dynamics and colleague relationship management. James Wong contributed perspectives from documentary filmmaking that revealed parallel challenges in maintaining artistic integrity and social justice focus within entertainment industry systems that often prioritized commercial viability over authentic storytelling and meaningful social impact. His current project about environmental justice had required years of relationship building with communities that had been historically exploited or ignored by mainstream media attention. Documentary work that addresses systemic social issues requires developing trust with communities that have legitimate reasons to be skeptical of outside attention and media representation, he shared with evident passion for his subject matter. The process cannot be rushed or manipulated for production schedules, because authentic storytelling requires understanding context and relationships that can only develop through sustained engagement and demonstrated respect for community priorities. His methodology emphasized patience, relationship building, and community consent that extended far beyond legal requirements to encompass genuine ethical consideration for the people and issues his work sought to represent. The approach required accepting slower production timelines and potentially smaller commercial returns in favor of authentic representation and meaningful social contribution. Maria Santos described her environmental activism work with strategic sophistication that revealed someone whose professional activities integrated policy analysis, community organizing, and corporate engagement in pursuit of systemic environmental protection improvements. Her current initiatives involve developing coalition relationships between environmental organizations, community groups, and business leaders who could contribute resources and influence toward shared environmental goals. Effective environmental activism requires understanding that sustainable change happens through building broad coalitions that include people with different motivations and priorities. She explained with analytical clarity that demonstrated years of experience in policy development and implementation strategies. Business leaders might support environmental protection for economic reasons that differ from community activists' concerns, but the practical outcomes can align even when underlying motivations vary. Her approach emphasized strategic thinking and relationship building that transcended ideological purity in favor of practical environmental protection achievements. The methodology required sophisticated understanding of diverse stakeholder perspectives and the ability to identify common ground that could support collective action toward shared environmental goals. These professional examples provided concrete models for how individuals could maintain authentic values and meaningful contribution within complex systems that did not always reward such priorities. The strategies they described required intelligence, courage, and persistence, but they demonstrated that authentic professional practice was possible even within challenging institutional contexts. Daniel contributed insights from his entertainment industry experience that revealed how he had navigated celebrity status and commercial pressures, while maintaining focus on projects that aligned with his personal values and social contribution interests. His recent film choices had reflected deliberate decisions to prioritize meaningful storytelling over maximum financial return or mainstream commercial appeal. The entertainment industry offers significant platform opportunities for social impact messaging, but it requires strategic decision-making about which projects serve authentic artistic and social purposes versus which projects primarily serve career advancement or financial goals. He shared with thoughtful consideration that demonstrated years of experience balancing artistic integrity with commercial realities. His approach involved accepting certain commercial limitations in exchange for creative control and meaningful content development. The strategy required financial planning and career management that could sustain periods of reduced income in favor of projects that contributed to social awareness and positive cultural change. These professional examples illuminated possibilities for structuring work-life around authentic values and meaningful contribution, rather than simply maximizing financial returns or social status. The individuals at our table had each developed strategies for maintaining professional integrity, while achieving sufficient success to sustain their chosen approaches and continue their meaningful work. The conversation naturally evolved toward discussing how these professional strategies could be applied to personal relationship decisions and life structure choices. The same principles that enabled authentic professional practice could be applied to family relationships, social activities, and personal decision-making processes. I found myself articulating insights about graphic design work that had previously remained unexamined in my own thinking. My freelance practice had actually been structured around values-based client selection and project criteria that prioritized social impact over maximum profitability, though I had not previously recognized or articulated this pattern in my professional decision-making. My design work has gradually evolved toward clients whose missions align with social benefit and environmental responsibility, I realized as I spoke. Nonprofit organizations, sustainable business initiatives, and educational projects have become increasingly important to my practice, even though they typically offer smaller budgets than corporate clients focused solely on profit maximization. The recognition that my professional choices had been unconsciously reflecting authentic values provided evidence that my authentic priorities had been influencing my decisions even during periods when I had not been fully aware of their impact. The pattern suggested that developing conscious alignment between values and choices would enhance both professional satisfaction and social contribution effectiveness. Dr. Martinez responded with analytical perspective that connected individual professional choices with broader social change possibilities. When professionals in various fields consistently choose values-based practice over purely financial optimization, the cumulative effect creates market demand for ethical approaches and demonstrates economic viability for principled business models. Her observation illuminated how individual authentic choices could contribute to systemic change by demonstrating alternative approaches to professional practice and creating economic incentives for values-based business operations. The connection between personal integrity and social change provided motivation for maintaining authentic professional practice, even when doing so required accepting certain financial limitations or career advancement compromises. James Wong extended this analysis to encompass broader cultural change possibilities through authentic artistic and media representation. Documentary work that prioritizes authentic community representation over sensationalized storytelling contributes to cultural shifts in how social issues are understood and addressed by broader audiences. His perspective demonstrated how individual professional authenticity could influence public awareness and social understanding in ways that supported systemic change and community empowerment. The approach required patience and commitment to long-term social impact over immediate recognition or commercial success. Maria Santos connected individual professional choices with environmental and social justice movement building that required sustained coordination among diverse participants working within their respective spheres of influence and expertise. Environmental protection requires professionals across multiple industries to integrate sustainable practices and social responsibility into their individual work contexts, creating cumulative impact that exceeds what any single organization or individual could achieve independently. Her analysis revealed how authentic professional practice could contribute to broader social and environmental change through coordinated individual choices that collectively shifted market dynamics and cultural priorities toward sustainability and social responsibility. These discussions provided a framework for understanding how personal authenticity and meaningful professional contribution could be integrated in ways that served both individual fulfillment and broader social benefit. The individuals at our table had each developed approaches that demonstrated practical applications of these principles within their respective fields and life circumstances. The wedding celebration continued around us with traditional activities and family interactions that increasingly felt disconnected from the meaningful exploration that was occurring at our table. The contrast between superficial social positioning and substantive relationship building had never been more apparent or significant for understanding what kinds of connections and activities actually contributed to personal fulfillment and authentic self-expression. As the evening approached its conclusion, I began contemplating how the insights and relationships that had developed during this unexpected gathering would influence my future professional and personal decision-making processes. The clarity about authentic values and meaningful relationship priorities had implications that extended far beyond immediate family dynamics to encompass fundamental questions about life structure and resource allocation. The recognition that I had been unconsciously allowing family expectations and social positioning concerns to influence decisions about career development, social activities, and personal relationships suggested that conscious alignment between authentic values and daily choices could dramatically enhance both personal satisfaction and social contribution effectiveness. The evening had provided evidence that meaningful relationships could develop rapidly when individuals shared authentic values and genuine interest in each other's work and perspectives, regardless of prior social connections or institutional affiliations. The quality of connection that had developed among our table companions demonstrated possibilities for building social relationships around shared purpose and mutual respect, rather than biological connection or social convenience. Daniel's presence had certainly catalyzed these realizations by providing external validation and social protection that enhanced my confidence in questioning established family dynamics, but the capacity for authentic relationship building and values-based decision-making had been present throughout my adult life, requiring recognition and development rather than creation from nothing. The question that emerged from this recognition involved how to structure future life choices around authentic values and meaningful relationships while maintaining practical considerations about financial sustainability and social connection that supported rather than constrained personal growth and authentic self-expression. The answer would require careful planning and strategic thinking similar to the approaches that our table companions had developed for maintaining professional integrity within complex institutional contexts. But the evening had provided evidence that such integration was both possible and essential for genuine personal fulfillment and meaningful social contribution. The final hour of the wedding reception became a strategic planning session disguised as social conversation, as the individuals at Table 12 began exploring concrete applications of the principles they had been discussing throughout the evening. The transformation from abstract philosophical discussion about authentic living to specific implementation strategies marked a decisive shift from theoretical understanding to practical action planning. Dr. Martinez initiated this transition by describing her current decision-making process for evaluating professional opportunities within healthcare systems that required balancing patient advocacy priorities with institutional expectations and financial constraints. Her methodology involved systematic assessment of potential roles according to criteria that measured alignment between organizational mission and personal values, rather than focusing exclusively on compensation packages or prestige markers. I maintain a written framework for evaluating professional opportunities that includes specific questions about patient populations served, institutional support for innovative treatment approaches, and organizational commitment to addressing healthcare equity issues. She explained with the analytical precision that characterized her medical training. This framework ensures that career advancement decisions align with my core professional values, rather than simply maximizing income or social status within medical hierarchies. Her approach demonstrated practical applications of values-based decision-making that could be adapted to various professional contexts and personal circumstances. The systematic evaluation process provided protection against unconscious compromise of authentic priorities in favor of external validation or short-term advantages that might conflict with long-term satisfaction and meaningful contribution. James Wong shared similar strategies from documentary filmmaking that involved developing explicit criteria for project selection that prioritized authentic storytelling and social impact over commercial appeal or industry recognition. His current work required rejecting funding opportunities that would compromise editorial control or community consent processes, despite the financial advantages such opportunities might provide. My project selection process includes specific requirements about creative control, community involvement in storytelling decisions, and distribution strategies that serve social justice goals, rather than simply maximizing audience reach or commercial returns. Quote, he detailed with evident conviction about the importance of maintaining artistic integrity. These criteria eliminate opportunities that might enhance career visibility, but would require compromising the authentic representation and community empowerment that make documentary work meaningful for me. His methodology revealed sophisticated understanding of entertainment industry dynamics, combined with principled commitment to authentic artistic practice that served broader social purposes rather than individual career advancement exclusively. The approach required accepting certain financial limitations and potentially slower career progression in exchange for meaningful creative work and positive social impact. Maria Santos contributed perspectives from environmental activism that demonstrated systematic approaches to organizational affiliation and project prioritization that ensured alignment between personal environmental values and professional activities. Her career development had involved deliberate choices about which organizations to work with and which initiatives to support, based on environmental effectiveness, rather than organizational prestige or personal advancement opportunities. I evaluate potential organizational affiliations according to their track record of achieving tangible environmental protection outcomes, rather than their reputation for visibility or political influence. She shared with the strategic thinking that had made her effective in policy development contexts. This approach has led me to work with smaller organizations that accomplish significant environmental improvements rather than larger organizations that generate more public attention but achieve fewer concrete results. Her decision-making framework prioritized environmental impact measurement over organizational status or personal career advancement, requiring sophisticated understanding of environmental policy effectiveness and the ability to assess organizational performance according to authentic environmental protection criteria rather than superficial visibility markers. These professional examples provided concrete models for developing personal decision-making frameworks that could be applied to relationship choices, social activities, and life structure decisions beyond professional contexts. The systematic approaches they described could be adapted to evaluate family relationship investments, social commitment priorities, and personal resource allocation according to authentic values rather than inherited expectations or social pressure. I found myself articulating my own emerging framework for evaluating family relationship investments and social commitment priorities based on criteria that measured genuine mutual respect and meaningful connection rather than biological obligation or social convenience. The evening's revelations had clarified specific elements that distinguished relationships that supported authentic self-expression from relationships that required performance of socially acceptable identity versions. I am beginning to develop explicit criteria for determining which family relationships deserve significant emotional investment based on whether they encourage authentic self-expression or require suppression of genuine values and interests. I shared with growing confidence in my ability to articulate previously unexamined relationship patterns. Relationships that consistently demand conformity to values that conflict with my authentic priorities may need different boundaries and investment levels than relationships that support genuine self-development and meaningful contribution. The framework involved systematic evaluation of family interactions according to specific criteria that measured relationship quality and personal development support, rather than simply maintaining harmony or fulfilling social expectations about family loyalty and participation. The approach required courage to establish boundaries that might generate conflict but would protect authentic self-expression and meaningful relationship building. Daniel contributed insights from entertainment industry relationship management that revealed sophisticated strategies for maintaining personal integrity while navigating professional networks that often prioritize transactional connection over authentic relationship building. His approach involved developing clear boundaries around personal privacy and relationship authenticity that protected genuine connections from professional exploitation or public scrutiny. My relationship management strategy involves maintaining distinct boundaries between professional networking and authentic personal relationships, with explicit criteria for determining which interactions serve mutual understanding versus which interactions primarily serve career advancement or public visibility. He explained with thoughtful consideration of entertainment industry relationship complexities. This approach protects genuine connections from becoming commodified, while still enabling productive professional collaboration with people who share similar values and artistic goals. Quote, his methodology demonstrated practical applications for protecting authentic relationships from external pressure and exploitation, while maintaining professional effectiveness and meaningful creative collaboration. The strategies could be adapted to various professional and personal contexts, where authentic relationship building competed with social positioning and transactional connection opportunities. These individual frameworks collectively provided comprehensive approaches to life-structured decision-making that prioritized authentic self-expression and meaningful contribution over external validation and social conformity. The systematic methodologies they described offered protection against unconscious compromise of personal values in favor of short-term advantages or social acceptance that ultimately undermined long-term satisfaction and genuine self-development. The conversation evolved toward exploring specific implementation strategies for beginning to apply these frameworks to immediate life circumstances and relationship dynamics. The transition from theoretical understanding to practical action planning required addressing potential obstacles and developing support systems for maintaining authentic choices when faced with external pressure or social disapproval. Dr. Martinez described her experience with initial resistance from colleagues and administrators when she began prioritizing patient advocacy over institutional efficiency metrics, and how persistence combined with strategic coalition building had gradually created support for her values-based approach to medical practice. Her experience demonstrated that authentic professional practice often required patience and strategic thinking, but ultimately generated respect and meaningful professional relationships. James Wong shared similar experiences from documentary filmmaking contexts, where commitment to authentic storytelling initially limited commercial opportunities, but eventually attracted collaborators and funding sources that shared his social justice priorities and artistic integrity values. His career trajectory demonstrated that values-based professional development could achieve both meaningful social impact and sufficient financial sustainability when approached with strategic thinking and patience. Maria Santos described her transition from conventional environmental career paths to more targeted activism work that initially involved accepting reduced income and social status, but eventually generated greater environmental impact and personal satisfaction than her previous positions had provided. Her experience revealed that authentic career development often required accepting short-term sacrifices in exchange for long-term alignment between professional activities and personal values. These transition experiences provided evidence that authentic living strategies could be successfully implemented despite initial challenges and social pressure, and that persistence in maintaining values-based decision-making ultimately generated both personal satisfaction and meaningful professional accomplishment. The examples demonstrated practical pathways for beginning to implement authentic choice frameworks even within existing professional and personal circumstances. The wedding reception was drawing to its natural conclusion as other guests began departing and the celebration activities wound down, but the conversation at table 12 had evolved into something that extended far beyond typical wedding guest interaction. The connections that had developed among individuals who had been strangers hours earlier demonstrated the rapid relationship building that became possible when people shared authentic values and genuine interest in each other's meaningful work and personal development. As the evening approached its end, contact information was exchanged among table companions with expressions of genuine interest in maintaining connections that had developed through substantive conversation and shared commitment to authentic living principles. The relationships that had formed represented possibilities for ongoing support and collaboration in implementing values-based decision-making approaches within respective professional and personal contexts. Daniel and I prepared to leave the celebration with fundamentally different perspectives about family relationships, social positioning, and authentic self-expression than we had possessed upon arriving. The evening had provided evidence that meaningful connections could develop rapidly when individuals prioritized genuine understanding over social performance, and that authentic relationship building required courage to risk social disapproval in favor of values-based interaction. The seating arrangement that had initially felt like social punishment had actually provided access to the most meaningful conversation and authentic connection available at the wedding celebration. The family members who had been positioned at prestigious tables based on biological connection and social status had missed opportunities to engage with individuals whose work was creating positive social change and whose perspectives could have enhanced their own understanding and personal development. This recognition extended beyond the wedding context to illuminate broader patterns in social relationship building and life structure decision-making that prioritize superficial connection over meaningful engagement and inherited obligations over authentic choice. The evening had demonstrated that alternative approaches to social interaction and relationship building were not only possible but essential for genuine personal fulfillment and meaningful contribution to social progress. The question that remained involved how to maintain the clarity and courage that had emerged during this exceptional evening when returning to ordinary life circumstances that would test commitment to authentic choice-making and values-based relationship building. The answer would require systematic implementation of the frameworks and strategies that had been developed during the conversation, combined with ongoing connection to individuals who shared similar commitment to authentic living and meaningful social contribution. The wedding celebration had become a laboratory for examining authentic relationship building and values-based decision-making that provided both theoretical understanding and practical implementation strategies for structuring life around genuine self-expression rather than external validation and inherited expectations. The Monday morning after Rebecca's wedding arrived with Seattle's characteristic gray sky and persistent drizzle, but my perspective on the routine elements of daily life had been fundamentally altered by the weekend's revelations. The same apartment that had felt comfortable and sufficient before the wedding celebration now seemed like a staging area for more intentional living, rather than simply a place where I maintained existence between professional obligations and social commitments. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a legal pad, beginning the systematic process of applying the decision-making frameworks that had emerged during conversations at Table 12. The theoretical understanding of authentic choice-making needed translation into concrete actions, that would align my daily life with the values and priorities I had articulated during those meaningful discussions. The legal pad became divided into specific categories that reflected different aspects of life structure that required evaluation and potential modification. Professional relationships required assessment according to whether they supported meaningful work and authentic professional development versus simply maintaining income generation and industry connections. Family relationships needed analysis based on criteria that measured genuine mutual respect and support for personal growth rather than biological obligation and social convenience. Social commitments required examination to determine which activities contributed to intellectual stimulation and authentic connection versus which activities primarily served image management and superficial networking. Financial priorities needed review to ensure resource allocation reflected authentic values about meaningful contribution rather than status symbols and social positioning markers. The professional relationship category proved most immediately actionable because my freelance graphic design practice provided flexibility for implementing values-based client selection and project prioritization strategies. The previous evening's conversation had illuminated patterns in my work that had unconsciously been reflecting authentic values, suggesting that conscious alignment could enhance both professional satisfaction and social impact effectiveness. I reviewed my current client roster with analytical attention to the mission alignment and social contribution aspects of each relationship. 3 clients emerged as clearly consistent with meaningful work criteria: a nonprofit organization focused on environmental education, a sustainable business incubator that supported socially responsible entrepreneurship, and an affordable housing development group that prioritized community empowerment alongside financial sustainability. These clients represented work that engaged my professional skills while contributing to social issues I genuinely cared about, creating integration between authentic values and professional activities that generated both personal satisfaction and meaningful social impact. The projects involved creative challenges that required sophisticated design solutions while serving purposes that extended beyond commercial promotion to encompass education, social change, and community development. 2 other clients appeared more problematic when evaluated according to authentic choice criteria. One was a luxury real estate development company that specialized in gentrification projects that displaced existing communities in favor of upscale housing that served affluent populations exclusively. Another was a corporate consulting firm that helped businesses optimize operations through strategies that typically resulted in employment reductions and benefit eliminations. These clients provided steady income and professionally challenging projects, but their missions were actively harmful to social equity and community well-being priorities that I had identified as authentic personal values. The financial security they provided came at the cost of professional integrity and meaningful contribution, creating internal conflict that had been generating persistent dissatisfaction despite successful project completion and client satisfaction. The recognition that professional dissatisfaction stemmed from mission misalignment rather than inadequate compensation or insufficient recognition provided clarity about necessary changes in client selection criteria and project acceptance decision-making processes. The solution involved developing explicit screening procedures that would prioritize mission alignment while maintaining financial sustainability requirements. I began drafting communication to the problematic clients that would complete existing project commitments while declining future work that conflicted with authentic professional values. The messages required diplomatic language that maintained positive relationships while establishing boundaries around future collaboration based on mission alignment priorities. The luxury real estate client received a message explaining that my design practice was transitioning toward projects that supported community development and affordable housing initiatives, making future collaboration unlikely due to strategic focus changes rather than performance or relationship issues. The corporate consulting firm received similar communication about practice specialization in nonprofit and social benefit sectors that would preclude future availability for projects focused on operational optimization and cost reduction strategies. These messages represented the first concrete implementation of authentic choice frameworks in professional contexts, requiring courage to potentially reduce income in favor of values alignment while maintaining professional courtesy and relationship respect. The decision-making process had become systematic rather than emotional, based on explicit criteria rather than unconscious reaction to mission conflict. The family relationship category required more nuanced analysis, because biological connections carried social expectations and emotional complexities that professional relationships did not involve. The weekend's experiences had revealed patterns of conditional approval and transactional interaction that contradicted authentic relationship-building principles, but addressing these patterns required strategic thinking about boundary establishment and relationship modification rather than simple termination. I began documenting specific examples of family interactions that demonstrated conditional approval patterns, focusing on situations where my achievements were acknowledged only when they enhanced family social positioning or reflected well on family success narratives. The pattern recognition process revealed consistent themes across multiple family members and social situations over many years. The most significant pattern involved family members who showed genuine interest in my life and perspectives only when such attention could serve their social or professional networking purposes. Uncle Thomas represented the most transparent example of this dynamic, but similar patterns appeared in interactions with other relatives who treated my relationships and achievements as resources available for their strategic use, rather than personal accomplishments deserving independent recognition and respect. Another pattern involved family members who provided support and encouragement for my choices only when those choices aligned with their understanding of appropriate success trajectories and social positioning strategies. My career development had received enthusiastic family support when it appeared to be following conventional professional advancement patterns, but had generated concern and subtle discouragement when it moved toward values-based practice and meaningful social contribution priorities. These patterns suggested that authentic family relationship building would require establishing explicit boundaries around personal privacy and autonomous decision-making while maintaining respectful connection where possible. The approach would need to protect authentic self-expression and meaningful relationship development without unnecessarily creating conflict or completely severing family connections that retained potential for positive evolution. I began developing communication strategies for family interactions that would assert personal autonomy while maintaining appropriate courtesy and relationship respect. The strategies involved preparing responses for predictable family dynamics that would redirect conversation away from personal details that could be exploited for social positioning, while still participating in family gatherings and maintaining basic relationship connections. The social commitment category required evaluation of activities and relationships that had been consuming significant time and energy, without contributing to intellectual stimulation, authentic connection, or meaningful personal development. The analysis revealed several social obligations that had been maintained primarily to avoid conflict or disappointment, rather than because they provided genuine value or satisfaction. Professional networking events that focused on superficial relationship building and industry status positioning had been consuming considerable time, without generating meaningful professional connections or interesting collaborative opportunities. Social gatherings that centered on material status comparison and lifestyle competition had been creating anxiety and dissatisfaction rather than enjoyment and authentic social connection. These activities had been justified as necessary for professional development and social relationship maintenance, but systematic analysis revealed that they were actually counterproductive to both professional advancement and authentic relationship-building goals. The time and energy they consumed could be redirected toward activities that better served genuine values and meaningful connection priorities. I began declining invitations to social events that did not meet explicit criteria for intellectual engagement, authentic connection opportunity, or meaningful social contribution. The decline messages were diplomatically worded, but clearly established changed priorities around time allocation and social engagement that reflected authentic values rather than social obligation compliance. The financial priority category required examination of spending patterns and resource allocation decisions that reflected inherited assumptions about appropriate lifestyle markers rather than conscious choices based on authentic values and genuine satisfaction sources. The analysis revealed several expense categories that were serving social positioning purposes, rather than contributing to personal fulfillment or meaningful life experiences. Subscription services and material purchases that had been justified as professional necessities or social requirements often provided minimal actual value, while consuming resources that could be redirected toward activities and experiences that better served authentic interests and values. The recognition that many financial decisions had been unconsciously driven by status considerations rather than genuine preference created opportunities for significant resource reallocation. The systematic evaluation process continued throughout the morning as I applied the frameworks that had emerged during the wedding conversation to every aspect of life structure and relationship management. The process required honest assessment of current circumstances combined with strategic planning for implementing changes that would align daily life with authentic values and meaningful contribution priorities. By noon, I had developed comprehensive plans for modifying professional relationships, establishing family interaction boundaries, restructuring social commitments, and reallocating financial resources according to explicit criteria that reflected authentic values rather than inherited expectations or social pressure compliance. The implementation would require courage and persistence, but the clarity about necessary changes had eliminated uncertainty about direction and priorities. The afternoon brought the first test of these new frameworks when my phone rang with a call from Aunt Patricia, who had apparently spent her morning processing the previous evening's wedding events and developing strategies for managing the social implications of my relationship with Daniel and the family dynamics that had been revealed during our interactions. Her voice carried the carefully controlled tone that had become familiar during family crisis management situations that required diplomatic relationship navigation and strategic damage control. The conversation would provide immediate opportunity to implement the boundary establishment and authentic communication strategies that had been developed during the morning's planning session. The call represented the beginning of translating theoretical frameworks into practical relationship management that would test commitment to authentic choice-making when faced with familiar family pressure and social expectation patterns. The response would establish precedent for future family interactions and demonstrate whether the weekend's insights could be maintained when challenged by established relationship dynamics and external pressure for conformity compliance. The telephone conversation with Aunt Patricia began with carefully orchestrated pleasantries that carried underlying tension, the verbal equivalent of diplomatic negotiations between parties who understood that their relationship dynamics were undergoing significant recalibration. Her opening comments about the wedding's success and Rebecca's happiness served as preamble to the real purpose of her call, which involved addressing the social complications that had emerged from Daniel's presence and my unexpected assertion of boundaries during family interactions. Victoria, darling, I wanted to follow up on our brief conversation last evening. Patricia began with the measured tone she employed during situations that required delicate handling of potentially volatile family dynamics. I hope you understand that our seating arrangements were not intended to cause any discomfort or suggest anything negative about your importance to the family. The statement represented a carefully constructed attempt to address the seating situation without acknowledging the transparent social calculations that had determined Table 12 placement or accepting responsibility for the message that arrangement had communicated about my perceived status within family hierarchies. The diplomatic language sought to minimize potential offense while avoiding admission that their assessment of my social significance had been fundamentally flawed. I recognized this communication pattern from decades of family interactions where problematic behaviors or decisions were addressed through indirect acknowledgement that avoided direct responsibility while attempting to restore harmony without substantive change or genuine apology. The approach had historically been effective because it provided face-saving alternatives for all parties, while maintaining established power dynamics and relationship structures. The morning's planning session had prepared specific responses for precisely this type of family communication, enabling me to implement boundary-setting strategies while maintaining appropriate courtesy and relationship respect. The conversation would provide immediate testing of whether authentic choice frameworks could be maintained when confronted with familiar pressure patterns and social expectation enforcement. Patricia, I appreciate your concern about the seating arrangements, I replied with calm professionalism that established respectful but firm boundaries around the conversation's direction and scope. The table placement actually provided excellent opportunity to meet accomplished professionals whose work is creating positive social impact. Dr. Martinez, James Wong and Maria Santos were fascinating conversation partners whose perspectives enhanced the entire evening experience. The response acknowledged her concern while redirecting attention away from family social positioning toward the meaningful connections and intellectual engagement that had actually characterized the evening's most valuable aspects. The strategy avoided defending against implied criticism while asserting alternative criteria for evaluating social interactions and relationship quality. Patricia's slight pause revealed her processing of this unexpected response, which did not follow predictable patterns of family conflict resolution or social validation seeking, that would have enabled her to continue with prepared talking points about family loyalty and appropriate social positioning priorities. "Well, yes, I'm certain they are lovely people," she continued with the diplomatic flexibility that had served her through years of family relationship management, "but I was more concerned about ensuring that Daniel felt welcomed and appropriately honored during his first experience with our family celebration." The statement represented a strategic pivot that repositioned her concern as consideration for Daniel's comfort rather than acknowledgement of problematic family dynamics, while simultaneously establishing his importance in her role as family social coordinator responsible for managing celebrity guest relations. The language choice revealed underlying assumptions about social hierarchy and the importance of impressing someone whose fame elevated his opinion's significance within their value system. Patricia's concern was not genuinely about Daniel's comfort, which he had clearly expressed satisfaction with, but about family reputation management and missed opportunities for enhanced social positioning through celebrity association. I applied the communication strategies developed during the morning's boundary establishment planning, maintaining focus on authentic relationship values, while avoiding engagement with superficial social positioning concerns that had historically dominated family interaction patterns. Daniel expressed genuine appreciation for meeting people whose professional work aligned with his interests in social impact and meaningful contribution. I responded with emphasis on the authentic connection criteria that had actually enhanced our evening experience. He particularly enjoyed Dr. Martinez's insights about healthcare equity and James's environmental justice documentary work. These conversations provided exactly the kind of intellectual engagement that makes social events meaningful for both of us. The response continued redirecting attention toward substance over status, while implicitly challenging assumptions about what constituted appropriate guest experience and valuable social interaction. The message emphasized that Daniel's satisfaction had derived from authentic connection rather than status recognition, subtly questioning the value system that had shaped their social planning and relationship prioritization. Patricia's response revealed her struggle to understand perspectives that prioritized meaningful conversation over social positioning and authentic connection over status validation. Her worldview had been constructed around assumptions about celebrity preferences and social hierarchy importance that made Daniel's genuine interest in substantive discussion incomprehensible rather than admirable. "I'm certain those conversations were intellectually stimulating," quote, she acknowledged with diplomatic grace that masked obvious confusion about why someone would prioritize such interactions over family relationship building and social recognition opportunities. "But I was hoping we might arrange a more intimate family gathering where Daniel could get to know the extended family in a more personal setting." The suggestion represented a renewed attempt to position Daniel within family social dynamics that would enhance their status through celebrity association while providing additional opportunities for networking and relationship building that could serve The proposed gathering would likely involve the same superficial interaction patterns that had characterized the wedding reception, focused on impressing Daniel rather than understanding his interests or building genuine relationships based on shared values and mutual respect. The invitation extended not from authentic interest in his perspectives or genuine desire for meaningful connection, but from strategic social positioning and celebrity proximity benefits. I implemented the boundary establishment strategies that had been developed for precisely this type of family pressure, maintaining respectful communication while protecting authentic relationship priorities and personal autonomy around social commitment decisions. "Patricia, Daniel and I appreciate family interest in building relationships, but our current priorities involve focusing on the meaningful connections we've already established while managing the demands of our respective professional commitments." I replied with diplomatic firmness that acknowledged her invitation while declining participation in family social programming that did not serve authentic relationship-building purposes. "We're particularly interested in maintaining contact with the professionals we met at the wedding, whose work in healthcare, environmental activism, and social justice documentaries aligns with our shared interests in meaningful social contribution." The response provided explicit reasoning for declining family social programming, while emphasizing alternative relationship priorities that reflected authentic values rather than biological obligation or social convenience. The communication strategy protected personal autonomy while maintaining appropriate courtesy toward family relationship overtures. Patricia's reaction revealed the challenge she faced in understanding decision-making frameworks that prioritized authentic connection over family loyalty expectations and meaningful engagement over social positioning opportunities. Her next approach attempted to leverage family relationship obligations and social responsibility arguments that had historically been effective in securing compliance with family expectations and social programming participation. Victoria, I understand your interest in these professional relationships, but surely you recognize the importance of Daniel developing authentic connections with family members who will be part of your life for years to come. She persisted with the emotional manipulation strategies that had characterized family relationship management throughout my adult life. Extended family relationships provide stability and support that professional acquaintances cannot replicate, regardless of how intellectually stimulating their conversation might be. The argument represented sophisticated emotional pressure that combined family loyalty expectations with practical considerations about long-term relationship stability and social support systems. Patricia was attempting to generate guilt about prioritizing new professional relationships over established family connections, while positioning family obligations as more substantial and reliable than alternative relationship-building opportunities. The communication pattern had been effective throughout my adult life because it appealed to reasonable concerns about social support and relationship stability, while obscuring the conditional nature of family approval and the transactional aspects of their relationship-building approaches. The emotional manipulation was subtle but persistent, designed to generate compliance through obligation rather than enthusiasm or genuine agreement. The morning's planning session had anticipated this specific pressure pattern and developed responses that would maintain boundary integrity while addressing legitimate relationship stability concerns through factual assessment rather than emotional manipulation compliance. Patricia, meaningful family relationships develop through genuine mutual respect and authentic connection rather than social obligation or biological proximity. I responded with analytical clarity that challenged the premises underlying her emotional pressure strategies. The relationships that provide actual stability and support are those based on understanding and appreciation of authentic identity, rather than expectations about conformity to family social positioning priorities. The response directly challenged family relationship assumptions, while providing alternative criteria for evaluating relationship quality and stability that prioritized authenticity over biological connection and mutual respect over social obligation compliance. Patricia's silence following this response indicated her recognition that familiar persuasion strategies were not generating expected compliance, and that the conversation required different approaches or strategic retreat from relationship management attempts that were clearly ineffective with modified family dynamic participation. The telephone conversation continued for several more minutes as Patricia attempted various alternative approaches to securing participation in family social programming, while I consistently applied boundary maintenance strategies that protected authentic choice priorities without unnecessarily generating conflict or relationship damage. The interaction provided successful testing of the implementation frameworks developed during the morning's planning session, demonstrating that systematic boundary establishment could be maintained even when confronted with sophisticated family pressure and emotional manipulation strategies. The conversation concluded with diplomatic acknowledgement of different priorities and perspectives, while maintaining respectful relationship connection that did not require compromising authentic choice frameworks or participating in family social dynamics that conflicted with genuine values and meaningful relationship-building priorities. The successful navigation of this initial family pressure test provided confidence that the decision-making frameworks developed during the wedding weekend could be implemented effectively in ongoing life circumstances, while maintaining appropriate relationship respect and personal integrity simultaneously. The afternoon brought additional opportunities to apply authentic choice implementation strategies as other family members and social contacts began responding to the wedding weekend revelations and attempting to position themselves advantageously relative to modified social dynamics and celebrity association opportunities. Each interaction provided practice in applying systematic boundary establishment and authentic communication strategies, while building confidence in maintaining values-based decision-making approaches despite external pressure and social expectation enforcement attempts. The cumulative effect of successful boundary implementation began generating positive feedback cycles that reinforced commitment to authentic choice frameworks, while demonstrating practical benefits of aligning daily life with genuine values and meaningful relationship-building priorities. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.